I just saw your movie, which you showed me before Venice.
Yeah.
In an unfinished, work in progress mode. So
Well,
I'm not
it's pretty much done. I mean, there's a couple of VFX shots that need to be in it, but other than that, it's the film. You know.
Nick Cave, is he someone that you had known for a long time and worked with before?
Nick, I've known. I met Nick at like the drug dealers in 1986, probably. And when I say met, we didn't really meet. But he was there. But we have a girlfriend in common. Do you know Nick Cave music?
A bit.
A bit. Or there was a song called Diana.
Soundtracks, actually.
Oh, you know the soundtrack. Well, he wrote a record about the woman who ended up becoming the mother of my son, and that's how we first knew each other. Was basically Nick was her ex-boyfriend, and he was kind of like, I mean, in Melbourne, where I'm from, Nick Cave was like Jesus. You know what I mean? I mean, he was just a person that people had a very wide array of feelings about, but very intense feelings. People loved him, people were jealous of him, people hated him, but he was kind of like, you know, he was the crown prince. Sorry?
Joni Mitchell or Neil Young to Canada.
Yeah, he was a big deal.
Success.
Yeah, he was a big. Well, it was more than that. He was also dangerous. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Nick was dangerous, and he was notorious, and he was like an outlaw. You know. So, I didn't want to like the guy. You know what I mean? Because basically, I was in love with this girl, and that was her ex-boyfriend that she used to talk about all the time. And he told me like years later that she used to do the same thing to him about me. She would talk about me to him incessantly.
He's older than you.
10 years older, yeah. And we developed a kind of a telephone relationship. I think the first 6 times I met Nick, he didn't remember who I was. You know what I mean? But like, we developed a bit of a telephone relationship where he would call up to talk to Diana, and I you know, she wouldn't be there, and I'd you know, we'd start talking, and we always got along well on the phone, you know. But I guess we became friends probably in the last, you know, 10 years or something. Actually became friends, you know.
So he approached you about doing this documentary about the recording of his album.
Yeah, I mean, basically the genesis of the film was, you know, Nick was making this record, and Arthur died. His son died just over a year ago, 15-year-old. And the boy in the film, Earl, is the twin of the one that died. And as you can imagine, it's been an absolutely catastrophic event for the Cave family. I mean, you know, to just you know, they're traumatized, and they were halfway through making the record when Arthur died, and basically, you know, Nick decided to just go along and finish the record. And I think work has always been some kind of salve or salvation for him, you know.
He comes alive when he's performing.
Huh?
He really comes alive when he's performing.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't think in this case it actually worked.
Oh.
You know, I don't think it was. But the genesis of the film was him walking into like a newsagent in Brighton and seeing a Mojo magazine and realising that he had to promote the record. And the thought of it made him feel physically sick, because he realised he was going to have to be talking to journalists, and to discuss the context of the record would mean discussing Arthur, and it was something that he didn't feel he could do with strangers. And so I think the initial instinct behind making the film was for Nick to protect himself, you know, that he could basically, you know, he had a, it was to protect himself. It was so he didn't have to answer questions. But of course, you know, in making the film, it becomes the only subject that there is. And, you know, essentially, all the film is dealing with is Nick's grief feelings. You know, he starts to deal with it directly at the end, but I mean, when we started, we had no idea.
Around it for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
Why 3D in black and white?
Sorry. Because I thought that there's a sort of sparseness to the there's a kind of spatial quality to the music, and you know, I had no idea what the film was going to be. The film was completely improvised. You know, like we had no plan other than we're going to shoot the songs, and the idea of voiceover was something that happened just before we started shooting. You know, and
how did you physically do that?
What do you mean?
You recorded him looking at footage, responding to footage?
What do you mean?
The audio, the voiceover.
Oh, no. He would just... I told him what I wanted him to do, but I told him that I didn't want it to be polished. I wanted to... Anything that he thought... He had an iPhone, you know, and he got a microphone for it, and he would just... record things. He would have dreams, and he would wake up and he'd record his dream, and then he'd send it to me, and the next day to be like in a Dropbox. And he just sent me hours of stuff, and I just took pieces of it, and you know, we basically built sequences around pieces of things. You know,
I can see that there's images that you're marrying to audio, that you're doing that after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah,
Beautifully.
but I mean, there was weird things that happened, like, you know, the whole idea of the end of the film, you know, happened because it was such a strange thing. You know, we were driving to go and wrecking Nick's house, and the DP, Alvin, was talking about Tichy, this Czech photographer, about his black and white photos. And we walked into Nick's house, and there were 8 Tichy photographs, you know, and then Tichy became this subject, and then the stills photographer walked in, and Nick recorded this voiceover about Tichy as a way of getting into this subject of women, you know, as stolen moments. And I realized, okay, well, I've got to shoot the stills photographer for that piece of voiceover, which he just sent me that morning. And then I realized, well, maybe what I should do is I should shoot everyone in the crew. I should shoot a portrait of everyone. And if he comes up with any other stuff, then at least I've got a shot of each person. I can somehow work that into the film. And then I realized that if I'm going to shoot everyone, I've got to shoot everyone. You know what I mean? Like, I've got to shoot everyone who worked on the film. But there were certain people who weren't there, right? And so I thought, well, what will I do with those people? Do I just shoot like an empty space? Or do I shoot like an iPhone, you know, an iPhone picture of them? And then I realized that there's only one person who's really not there. And that became the whole idea of the end of the film, is to just basically end on this empty space where Arthur is no longer, you know. So the whole thing just developed in an organic fashion like that. So some things are being... Basically, there's a dialogue going on between the subject and the film, you know. Thanks, baby. You know, there was, it was
So
just
you
kind of
started a little
interactive.
voiceover that's you at the
Sorry?
very beginning. Are you ever your voiceovers? Is it always him?
It's always him.
Always him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the interviewer. You know, I'm the one who was.
The two of you sound not so far away from each other. You're fellow countrymen. You sound alike.
Oh, I mean, Nick.
You and Nick. Yeah.
Well, we come from the same town, you know.
Well, he's a really good writer, is the thing.
Yeah,
in every way.
Yeah,
Not just a good musician, but a good writer.
Yeah, he's great. He's
and
a
so
poet.
He's talking about that. He's talking about the writing process, and he's very articulate.
Yeah.
And so you're a fellow artist talking about creating art with him.
Well, obviously the film to some extent is about the creative process, you know, because it's being created out of nothing, you know, as we're going, and we're winging it, you know, and the film's sort of turning into what the film's going to be. I mean, the way the film begins with that me trying to get Warren to talk about it, and it's so difficult that you actually need the camera to break down before someone will actually be real, you know. I mean, I never knew if Nick would even discuss the subject, because it was, I mean, when we started shooting the film in February, Arthur died in June or July, so it was within 6 months. I mean, it was so raw, you know. And you know, as a friend, I wouldn't ask him the questions or try and steer him into the areas that I would steer him into as a filmmaker. You know what I mean? And there was always a lot of confusion around how to deal with the subject, you know, and whether the film is exploitative in some way, it exploits a tragedy, you know, and you know, what's the difference between somebody creating a portrait of a person going through an extraordinary experience, and at what point is it a little bit off, you know? Is it like grief porn or something like that, you know? And that was, you know, a constant worry for me and for him, you know, obviously for him.
Were you the person manning the camera, and when you did the interviews with him?
Yeah.
Were you on camera with him, or did you have another camera person?
I mean, I'm just sitting like this. I'm just sitting.
Yeah.
I'm just where you are. I'm just sitting off camera. Yeah.
But you have a camera person who's actually shooting.
Yeah.
Even in the car.
Oh yeah. I mean, the film, the camera, the 3D rig is like it's really painful to deal with.
Okay, so you needed someone who knew how to do it, and you were learning how to do it at the very beginning.
In terms of like
getting things in focus and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we just chucked in all the bits that you would usually cut out of a film. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I don't think perfection is your friend. You know, I think perfection is the enemy. And, you know, that thing about how a director is the person who presides over accidents, you know.
So I guess what I'm trying to get to is that you have two different kinds of filmmaking here. You have this very gorgeous, very well orchestrated music video kind of filmmaking with tracks and dollies and beautiful mounted lights and Nick performing in all his glory. And then you have much more raw, much more improvised material. Yeah, but even the other stuff's improvised too, you know. Even the music video stuff's improvised. You know, we pull in a certain amount of things, you know, like we've got these lights and they're on dimmers and we can do that. We set up a circular dolly, or we've got various pieces of gear, and you come up with a basic visual strategy for things. But it's also, because it's a performance, it's also about the camera being in the right place at the right time, because he's not going to sing the song over and over and over again, you know. I mean, a song like I Need You is something he can only do 3 takes of before his voice starts to crap out. So, you know. I actually really loved that first bit where he's sitting down at the piano and he's trying to figure out whether to do this dub and how to do it, and he has to fix a track. And he's anxious about it, and he hates overdubbing. And you really see the artist at work. You see him with his notes, and he's trying to figure out the chords. I loved that. It felt very revealing of his process.
Well, he's certainly honest. You know what I mean? Nickel, if you ask Nick a question, he'll tell you. Most of the time he will. You know, I mean, he's one of the only rock and rollers who write songs about impotence, about not being able to get it up. And I think that's pretty fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, there's not many areas where he's not prepared to look, you know. But I think, you know, I think the reason he wanted to make the film was to protect himself, to make a space for himself. It was the way to promote the record, where he didn't have to feel too exposed, you know.
And yet you do talk about the trauma at the end.
Yeah.
You do.
The whole film's about it. There's not really any other subject, you know.
And one of the songs is very much about loss, but very much about not being able to reach the person that he's talking to.
Yeah, well, more than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You showed him the movie then?
Yeah.
What did he think?
Well, his feelings were mixed. And he, I mean, I showed it to him and Susie at the same time. And Susie didn't like any of the stuff of her talking to camera, and Nick didn't like any of the stuff of him. But they liked each other.